I've been on YouTube for about 2 years now, and prior to that, I spent countless hours debating skeptics online daily for well over a year. Since I regularly deal with so many online skeptics these days, I've come to the sad conclusion that most of them tragically suffer from ARCS, which is an abbreviation for the technical term anti-religious cliche sloganism, or even its more progressive form, DSO, which is short for Dawkinitis Silly Objectionism, which has most likely prompted its victims to already have hit the dislike button by the time they've even reached this point in the video. These illnesses are obviously very tragic and spreading across the internet at alarming rates. However, few have resisted the infection, most notably several of my atheist subscribers. We can call them the atheismers. Now, I've been fortunate enough to meet some of the atheismers who have shown themselves to be reasonable, genuinely open to concede fair points, actually caring about facts and evidence instead of just saying that they do, and most importantly, they're ARCS free. If you're watching and you're a victim of ARCS, it might seem that I'm your enemy, but I want you to know I truly am here to help, even though it may not feel like it at this time. Now, today we're going to be talking about a few ways that you can start to get on the right path and treat this virus, although you might not yet even realize that you are indeed a carrier of the virus. But before we get into that, I just want to take a quick second to tell you guys about a new app that I recently found. So someone from the Smart News app team reached out to us to see if we'd be interested in having them sponsoring one of our videos because they thought that it would be something that you guys would enjoy. Now, you guys know me. I'm not too big on sponsors, and I haven't done any before, but when I tried the app, I genuinely did enjoy it. And to be completely honest, now I use the app just about every single day. I've personally become a fan of the app. So why I like it is because it's a news app that allows you to get specific news that you're looking for way faster. So I'm obviously particularly interested in knowing what's going on in the world as it relates to religion and Christianity, and this app made it a million times easier for me to stay current on what's going on. Now, as you guys already know, I'm a pretty busy dude, and I just don't have a ton of time to sift through the news to find current news on things that I need to keep up on, and this makes it way easier. Take a look. So now, one thing that I really like about the app is that it allows you to customize the news that you want to see. So for example, if you see right here, I added a tab specifically for Christian news. So I'm always up to date on the biggest Christian and religious news stories going on in the world. But this kind of works for whatever kind of news that you're looking for. If you want political news, just add a tab for conservative, or you can add a tab for liberal news, or you can add both if you want to read articles on both sides. Whatever you're looking for, this app will probably cover it. So go download it at the link below to see if it works for you too. It's free, and I think that you guys will really enjoy it. Okay, now let's get right into it. If this is your first time here, hit that sub button and let's get to the nitty gritty. So meme team, you guys ready? Then let's go! There's an old joke that goes something like this. There was a man who was convinced that he was dead, but in reality, he was very much alive. His delusion became such a problem that his family paid for him to see a psychiatrist. Now, the psychiatrist spent a ton of sessions trying to convince the man that he was still alive, but nothing seemed to work. The psychiatrist showed him his heart rate and everything, but he was still unconvinced. Finally, the doctor tried one last approach. He took out his medical books and proceeded to show the man that dead men do not bleed. After hours of tedious study, the man seemed convinced that the doctor was right in stating that dead men don't bleed. So the doctor said, "Do you now agree that dead men don't bleed?" "Yes, I do," the man replied. "Ah, very well then," the doctor said as he took out a needle and pricked the man's finger. And out came a trickle of blood, and the man stared at it as it poured out of his fingertip. Now, the doctor began to smile because now he was convinced that he finally got through to the guy. So he asked the man, he said, "Ah, now, what does that tell you?" And the man says, "Oh my goodness." And then he continued to stare at his finger in disbelief and said, "I guess dead men bleed after all." So now the point of the joke, of course, is that people can be so committed to what they don't want to believe that they'll ignore or reshape all of the evidence that goes against the things that they don't like. Now, this is somewhat human nature. We all do this to some certain extent in some cases, but it's made far worse when, like the man in the story, they don't offer any positive reasons for why they're correct. This leaves them especially open to being deceived by others and deceiving themselves without even realizing it. Now, instead of giving reasons for their beliefs, they subconsciously seek to only find ways to rationalize or reject all of the evidence that goes against what they don't want to believe. And this leads us to the first reason that a lot of atheists and skeptics might sound persuasive even though they shouldn't. It's far easier to deny something than to argue for something. This first reason has to do with the fact that atheists have recently incorporated a definition of atheism that's foreign to the historical philosophical definition of the word atheism. So now, it used to be that atheism meant that you believe that the proposition God does not exist is a true proposition. But unfortunately, that position requires a decent amount of critical thinking, and it would also come with the burden of proof. That's something that atheists online today try to avoid like the Black Plague. You may as well call the burden of proof pimples or loneliness or wanting to see David Wood in his underwear. Granted, these are things that no one wants, but for some reason, it's only the ARCS type who are terrified of the burden of proof. Now, instead of holding to the historical definition of atheism, they prefer the definition of atheism being nothing more than a mere lack of belief, which means that you could literally be as dumb as a brick and still be an atheist. Since you don't have to actually believe anything in order to qualify as an atheist, you only need to lack a belief in order to qualify as an atheist. Now, that's fine, of course, if they want to identify with a position that's equally applicable to a brain-dead person or a pet rock. That's fine by me. However, it's kind of ironic when they pick at theism, because theism by definition requires a functioning brain, but somehow these atheists have concluded that intelligent people use their intelligence to define themselves into a position that literally doesn't require a single shred of intelligence in order to hold the position. Riddle me that one. Thankfully, this thoughtless form of atheism isn't even a thing in academia, which means that our school system hasn't entirely jumped ship just yet. Virtually every philosopher in academia who happens to be an atheist wouldn't dare give such a ridiculous definition. The only problem is we're at a new time in history where feelings just don't care about your facts. This leaves these new online skeptics to keep their burden of proof allergies inside of their echo chamber without being very skeptical of what their favorite skeptics tell them. Now, I'm not a hater. I always give props where props are due, so I'm not going to sit here and act like their position doesn't come with any benefits. Using the definition of atheism being only a lack of belief allows them to demand simple answers to complex questions and then label the complex answer as word salad. That the definition allows them to frame the conversation in a way where they don't have to give arguments or defend anything that they actually believe. They can just sit back and do their best to poke holes in arguments, never giving an alternate explanation, while the entire time feeling like they're actually doing something worthwhile. Now, I gotta admit, that's a pretty convenient strategy, since it's much harder to actually give arguments and evidence for your position instead of just sitting back and saying, hey, well, I don't believe you, or I'm not convinced, or hey, that's not evidence. And even better, sit back and play hyper-skeptic. As we just saw with the dead men don't bleed joke, hyper-skepticism knows no bounds and it's virtually limitless. Now, if that's your strategy, again, I'm not a hater. Just don't be like this guy who complains when it's done to them.
But when you talk about intelligent design, you don't have anybody who's doing any evidence. You have the Wedge document. You have the Institute for Creation Research and other organizations that are similar to this, who are, instead of providing evidence for their position, merely trying to poke holes in the current model and failing to do so.
But this, however, is not their fault. Instead, this, my friends, is what ACRS does to an otherwise perfectly healthy brain. So please share this video so that way we can make the world a better place by getting rid of ACRS one video at a time. You can support our efforts by hitting that subscribe button down below, sharing this video with a loved one, and joining the Mean Dream support team. The link is down below. Now, if you know someone who's been infected with this tragic illness, please do me a favor and ask them,
"What do you meme?"